All right. Hello, all, and welcome back to Survivor Game Show Network. We are here for another exit interview for Survivor Exile Island. I am one of the hosts, Ian Moorhead, joined by my co host, Morgan Jackson, and exit interview specialist and the queen of the questions, Denny. Tonight, we are joined by our seventh place finisher and our fifth juror, John David Millsip. John, how are you doing?
Well, I'd say that I was glad to be here, but we all know I'd be lying to say that. Kind of wish I was still in the game, but always happy to spend some time with you three.
All right, John, your second org experience. And we're going to get into the nitty and gritty of it, but better than your first experience or no?
Well, no one on this call backstabbed me in this one, so that was a very big plus. But yeah, no, overall, this org felt like it was incredibly well constructed. And I know Ian and Morgan put love and care into this since we finished that first org last September. So I knew it was going to be a good experience, and I knew it was going to be one that I didn't want to miss out on.
I'm sure you watched our cast assessment, and we all said that you were going to make the merge this time around. And I really did feel that. And I wanted you to play a hero role because I do not think you are a villain. I would say you mostly stuck to that. We only saw a little villainous side come out a little here and there in the heat of the moment type stuff. But so thank you for just being you and playing the hero, which you are.
Well, thanks, Denny. Yeah, I got into this game. I wouldn't, we talked a lot prior to the game about how I was willing to embrace a villain role, and I wasn't going to force it, but I knew that I had to be ruthless in this game if I really wanted to go far. And actually, I ended up being completely the opposite of that. I wasn't ruthless at all. I was, in fact, too loyal, which actually cost me the game.
So talking about your pre-merge game a little bit, you find an idol like right off the bat. And you share that you have an idol with Mackenzie and Austin. So why? Because when I heard that you told, I'm like, no, like, why would you do that? So I know Mackenzie kind of put you on the spot. Is that why you told her, or?
No. So actually, it's really funny because after that challenge that we lost in the pre-merge, I had to go do my movie buff specialist podcast right away. So I wasn't there for the immediate hour of aftermath of that challenge. So I didn't know what any of the discussion was happening was. And after I was on the podcast, I hopped on that call with Austin and Mackenzie. And they're like, yeah, Connor and Michael are concerned that Gaby has the idol, so they want to split the vote on Jim and Gaby. And I'm just sitting there thinking, that's a terrible idea because I know I have the idol, so I know we don't need to split the vote. And I was pretty certain there's going to be a swap at some point, and I'm not going to be the one screwed because two people decided to put votes on Jim. So yes, Mackenzie did kind of catch me off guard. It's like, throughout the conversation, she eventually was like, I was very much pounding home, we don't need to split the vote, don't worry about it. And Mackenzie was like, do you just have the idol? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I'm sharing that with you because I'm willing to use it for any of the three of us as necessary moving forward. And I really just don't want Jim to feel alienated from the rest of the tribe because everything I was pushing forward in that pre-merge portion of the game was just keeping the tribe strong. And Andrew called it Navidi strong a lot, but that's not really what I was doing. More what I was doing was keeping everyone's spirits high, making everyone feel like they were part of a team together. And I wasn't saying, hey, we're not going to vote each other out come the merge. But what I was saying was, hey, let's not talk about the vote until we actually have to get to a vote.
That decision from John to tell Mackenzie and Austin completely shapes specifically the pre-merge, but even after that, because the next vote after that is the Bill Rock draw, and Jim goes to Rocks because they didn't put votes on him. If they voted for Jim in that first in that tribal council, I don't think Jim is so gung ho about sticking with the group, and which means that Bill and Victoria could very well still be in the game, and Mackenzie and Austin are toast, basically.
Yeah, I just would have tried to like flip it a different way because I would not want anyone to know if I had an idol. So I probably would have hopped on a Zoom with what's her face? Gaby. And just said, hey, you know, we really want to work with you. Gaby and someone else. We really want to work with you. Do you have an idol? Because if you have an idol, you're going to need to play it. There are votes coming your way. And she'd be like, I don't have an idol. And then just try to spin it that way. Just because I would not want anyone to know I had an idol. And if someone did, I would want to get them out of the game because I don't want anyone having that information. I totally get what you're saying, though.
And I definitely understand the point you were making too. Knowledge is power in this game. But for me, I really emphasize the fact that this idol was for the three of us. That, like, yes, I have this idol. I have had it literally since I got off my first phone call with you guys. But it's working for the three of us because I want the three of us to move forward, because I did feel incredibly close to those two at that time. Yeah, we're only a couple of days into the game, but I was already at a point where I was like, these are the type of people that I want moving forward in this game.
All right, so moving ahead to after the trivia challenge, which Alexa wins, you guys choose Lauren to go to Exile. And you did it because you wanted to force them, right, to go to Rocks or one of them to flip. And you voiced that to your tribe. And I loved that because sometimes when you talk, I'm like, John, shut up. You don't want everyone to see how smart you are. But in that instance, I was like, yes. Like, I just loved that you were putting it out there the way you did. So kudos to you on that.
Yeah, I also really benefited from the fact that we sent Lauren to Exile Island already. And after that first challenge, I was sitting there thinking, I kind of want Lauren to go, because surprise to no one who's watching this, Lauren and I are incredibly close. We are the best of friends, and I knew we were going into this game, but I had also spent weeks leading up to this game being like, I'm going to cut your throat, Lauren. Don't you worry. It's coming. So I was ready to cut her, but in the odd case that for some reason it made sense for the two of us to be working, I still wanted her to be there later on in the game. So I wanted Lauren to go to Exile the first vote, especially when I saw her performance in that first challenge. And then to have Mackenzie just say, we should send Lauren. I was like, yes, please. Okay. And after the trivia challenge, it just made sense, because if you looked at the division, the old Alexa tribe was down in numbers. So the only way they could really win this vote was if someone either flipped to their side and we didn't send someone from them. So I felt like Lauren, knowing Lauren personally, I knew Lauren would be the most likely person to flip, which meant that putting Lauren on Exile meant they had to make a tough decision. And if they can get mentally drained through a tough tribal council, it's just going to benefit me at the next challenge.
Right. I was surprised that the original Phil agreed to that decision so quickly. Do you have any thoughts about why they were just like, yeah, that's fine? Because I feel like if I had been in that position, I would be fighting to keep that advantage. Like, I wouldn't want to just be like, yeah, whatever, let them go to Rocks.
I think Mike, Alex, and Lilly were in a position where they were in a minority, so they knew if they put any pushback on it to kind of support their side, it put them in a bad spot on the new Alexa tribe. So I think they were just like, we just have to go along with this. We're also aligned with Lauren, so it's okay, she's being protected. And they knew Greg was a sociable enough person, probably not to get the votes on him.
I think that's what I was shocked about. That, yes, I agree that those three were like, we can't speak up or go on a different tangent because then we're just going to be targeted. But they were much closer with Greg than they were with Lauren. So if they would have been like, let's send Greg, it still keeps the 3-3 split. What do you think that would have how would your tribe have reacted to a Greg push from Mike, Lilly, and Alex?
I didn't really want to rock the boat. So I know I wouldn't have pushed that hard. I said my piece about Lauren. I laid it out logically, which is the way I approach this game completely, is logic. And it's a deep flaw in my game because a lot of people do not use logic when they are playing these games. And if you lay it out to them, they just don't understand it. But in that case, they did understand it even before the swap. We were already talking about who we wanted to send to Exile again. And that was Lauren, because we wanted to minimize the amount of people who could have access to an advantage. So we knew that if we kept sending Lauren back there, yeah, Lauren probably has the advantage, but then we know these other people don't have the advantage. And everyone just kind of followed along with it. So it was something that we could do. It was easy enough. If they had said Greg and they presented a logical decision, turns out you spout logic to me, I'm probably going to agree with you. If you give me a good reason, I'm going to go along with it. But I probably wouldn't have put up a push. I probably would have just waited to see what everyone else responded with first.
The dynamic of you and Lauren intrigued me so much before the game started, during the game, because I didn't know, are these two going to try to work with each other or are they going to try to take the other out? And we kind of saw it flip-flop throughout. But I thought you guys were going to work together. And then Simmons comes back from Exile with Lauren and tells you she's coming for you. And then we see you say, if Lauren wants a war is what she's going to get. So did you have it in your mind this is it? You didn't even question whether Simmons was being honest. You felt it.
I ran with that narrative so much because I still knew deep down inside me, I knew if I'm being painted as this large target over here, and I already knew that my tribe was kind of painting Lauren that way as well, that if I could feed into that, come a merge, Lauren and I wouldn't be looked at as people working together. Despite the fact that we were very open about this. I mean, at least I was very open about the fact that I knew Lauren, not to the extent that Lauren and I know each other, but I was very open in first calls. I was like, hey, Lauren hosted this other org I played because that's easy information for anyone to find if they wanted to. So there's no point in denying that. Opened up about that. They knew I knew Lauren. They knew that I understood how Lauren thought. And I just felt like if I kept up this rouse that, yes, I'm gunning for Lauren because she's clearly a strong player who needs to get out of the game, it would detract from any thoughts about the two of us working together if it came to a point where it made sense for us to work together.
I have to talk about Exile a lot because it is such a huge part of this game. After the timed challenge, Zucker in the Zoom chat, you guys are trying to decide who to send. Zucker mentions Victoria's name, but then it's decided Greg's going to go. Why Greg? Because I'm just thinking I get they're not on his tribe, but can't they see that he is a threat in this game? And why are they keeping him safe? Does everyone want to work with Greg? Even you guys that you're just yeah, let's send Greg to Exile.
The issue at that point was Greg was the only person I hadn't been on. Greg and Victoria were the only people I hadn't been on a tribe with, but I know Victoria through the specialists. We've been on some of the, we were part of the China rewatch together. So I've interacted with Victoria before, and Greg was kind of this enigma to me. At that point in the game, I didn't understand how he operated in the game. I didn't understand how enthralling he was to everyone else, but I just didn't want to push it. I pushed hard for the Lauren to Exile the time before, so I didn't want to push it too hard. They were advocating for someone from their own tribe to go, so they would automatically be in a minority. I couldn't really push back as to why it should be Victoria over Greg.
Did you want it to be Victoria?
I honestly went into that being like, I'm not even going to say anything. I'll let them decide.
I just wondered, like, for your personal game, if you had a preference, because hearing you say that you, I mean, not that you knew her, but that you had interactions with her. And it seemed from the episode that she was on the bottom. Now you don't really know, but you could have had an inkling that Victoria's on the bottom.
Yeah, but I also had an inkling Victoria didn't want to work with me when she didn't pick me in the draft.
Yeah, we did ask her about that. But I just found that so strange. I was just like, that's not what I would have done, is save Greg. But of course, we're not seeing things through your eyes. We're seeing things in the background. So,
and again, a lot of it came down to that idea that I just wanted to keep this cohesive tribe. We're at the point where we've won 2 immunity challenges in a row. We're riding high right now. We don't need animosity within our own tribe. So if we everyone kind of just went along with it, we were all pretty easygoing with it. There was no need to make a fuss there to build any tensions within the tribe, because that could come back to haunt us later on.
Okay, so bumping ahead to after the second tribe swap, Connor volunteers once again. Now your tribe won. But joint tribal, and we hear Connor volunteer again to go to Exile. Were you hoping that maybe they would send him? Like, I'm really curious your thoughts on Connor, and if you really did want to work with him in the game, because it seemed like Connor did want to work with you. And we hear everyone say he's chaotic. A chaotic player isn't necessarily bad for the one person that they're loyal to, because then you have him in the game. He's always going to be looked at as a target before you. They're still going to want to get him out. So were you hoping that they'd send him to Exile so he'd be safe? Were you wanting to work with him in the game?
It's a tough call with Connor. Connor and I were the only 2 Canadians on the cast, so we had that bit to connect with. Connor's also a decade younger than me, more than a decade younger than me. So that was a little bit of disparity. But I had just recently been teaching high school, so like I knew kind of how to talk to a high school student. And that's the reason why I brought Connor into the Five Amigos right away. I was like, this is a teenage boy. He's going to be loyal to whoever extends that trust to him first. So I wanted to make sure I was the first person to do it. Connor was the first person I contacted for the Five Amigos. I was like, yeah, we're going to work together. Because I knew that if I got there first, he would be loyal to me. And as we kept going, he had the first Exile idea, and I was like, that's not a great idea, but you do you, Connor. Go for it. And he was chaotic, but he was controlled enough that I didn't feel it was necessary for him to go. Had I gone to tribal with him, he probably would have been the person going at that point. But I also wanted him there as a number. My concern with Connor was that he would try to make a move too early. And that was the big thing I was trying to avoid in this game, was making a big move too early can be so detrimental to you. So I was really locked in with going quite far in the game with a lot of these people I was aligned with at this point, and not willing to make a move until we got down to like 6, because that's when the big moves had to start happening. Because if you falter before that, the other side is just going to start picking you off one by one.
Which is, it's funny. It's funny that like you give that spiel about like Connor, like who knows what would have happened. But if you, because at that Exile, like you each voted for to send somebody, and if you would have switched your vote and not voted for Lilly and voted for Connor, he would have been on Exile.
Yeah, and I can't even remember at this point why I voted for Lilly in the first place. Like, that made no sense to be the person I voted for. I should have been voting for Connor or at least Zucker in that position. But I think what my mentality was looking at the numbers. You had Andrew, Austin, Zucker, and Connor, and Jim in that tribal council. So my mentality was, if we get rid of Lilly, it's likely that one of Greg or Lauren goes, and those are two bigger threats that could be more dangerous down the line. I kind of wanted to keep these numbers intact from like the original Alexa tribe, hoping they would come together and get rid of one of these bigger threats from the original Phil tribe, but also being willing to sacrifice Connor if necessary.
And you also had almost no time to think about it. So
there was also that.
Also
and
that.
It's just clearly in retrospect now, and I'm pretty sure that was my mentality. But in hindsight, I definitely should have sent Connor to exile.
That was just an alliance I wanted to see longer in the game, was you and Connor. I said from the get-go that Connor is someone I would have latched onto immediately if I was in the game and he was on my tribe. So I loved that you did that because you saw the same thing in him that I did. But it didn't last long enough. I just would have loved to see it.
Yeah, and Connor's a great kid. Seriously, it was a pleasure playing the game with him. But I was getting very wary that eventually he was going to get overeager and try to flip things on me earlier than he should be.
Good use of your vocabulary work.
I noticed that, and I noticed you smiling, Morgan. All right, so jumping ahead, we see you give a confessional about how you're jumping on a call with Greg, and then Morgan sends out a clue. And you're frantically trying to work on it and playing it off like it's work. So, but you got it.
I did.
There was some suspicion that you got it.
Yeah. I mean, I was working at that time when I was on a call with Greg. So I did have that excuse. But literally it was like Greg and I finally got a chance to talk to each other. And then Morgan sends tree mail literally right after Greg and I like, okay, we're going to go hop on this call now. And I was like, I need to go for this. Like, I have to go for it. So at least know where it is. So like I'm having this conversation and Greg and I had a great first conversation still. And I'm just like panicking the entire time. Cause I also realized I wrote, because this clue was the one where in tree mail, there were the different capitalized letters. I wrote the order of them down incorrectly at one point. So I'm like frantically going through all the tree mails to double check the letters so I can correspond them with the numbers in this clue. And then I send it and I thankfully get it. And I'm like, okay, good. The thing was, I should have continued that hecticness throughout the call afterwards. That's the mistake I made because I unfortunately didn't press the record button at the beginning of that conversation, but Greg, there was a tonal change in the conversation at that point, and I wasn't as secretive as I should have been. And I should have, looking back at it, I definitely should have kept the like hecticness of what I was doing there. So it did actually still look like work, but hindsight.
You're like frantic, and then you get it. And then you're just,
I mean, I was still kind of frantic because I was still working, but it was less frantic.
And this cast was like every day tree mail was sent out and Morgan had sent tree mail with like miscapitalized letters, and the cast could tell that like it was gonna be something. So when like the clue came out at noon on that day, like I knew that over half the cast in that like moment in time was going for the clue, and John got it by 5-10 minutes. Austin was very close behind. Jim was very close behind Austin. There were several people that solved it within 90 minutes of it being out. And so, yeah, I mean, the franticness at least paid off in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing is, sorry, Morgan.
I was just gonna say I was very proud of that idol clue, and it was just like really fun because it was a really like long build up to it of the first few weeks of the game, and then you just release the actual clue. So
yeah, and the other reason I knew I had to be right on top of that idol clue is because I had already been talking about it with Austin and I had been talking about it with Zucker. So I knew at least two people knew what to be looking for. I knew I didn't have to worry about Zucker because he was working, but I knew Austin knew what he was looking for. So I knew I had to get on it as quickly as possible.
So moving ahead to the challenge with the stages that Simmons wins, we see you in a Zoom with Austin, Jim, and Mackenzie, and you're saying this vote is so important. And it was.
Yes, it was.
It was a very crucial vote. And it was asked, like Lauren's name was brought up because Mackenzie said, well, I think we have Lauren. And it was asked, how good do you feel about Lauren? How good were you actually feeling about Lauren? Because you were kind of quiet in that moment.
I was really downplaying to Austin and Mackenzie how close I was with Lauren, especially because at the merge, mine and Lauren's first conversation went, okay, let's cut the bullshit. You've been throwing my name around. I've been throwing your name around. We're totally working together, right? That was literally the conversation because we knew at that point, because of how much we had built up each other as targets, no one was going to be expecting us to work together. Then Andrew came along and tells the two of us, hey, you should work together. It's like, oh, and I really played it off with Andrew. I'm not like, yeah, we totally are. It's like, I'll think about it. Like, I'll reach out to her and stuff. And then Andrew goes around telling everyone else Lauren and I are working together. It's like, well, thanks for blowing that up. That's why Andrew became the target in that merge boot, was because I trusted Andrew to an extent, but I also knew he was a game player. I wanted to keep him in because I knew he was a big target. I knew he would be the type of person who would help lower my threat level by raising everyone else's. But as soon as he starts saying stuff like that, it's like, you're seeing too much of the truth here by accident, and you're not telling me enough of it. So I can't risk having you here. So I was very confident that I had Lauren at that vote, and that was incorrect.
That was very incorrect. She took a shot at you by taking out Zucker, who she believed was your right-hand man. Now, later we find out that Zucker did want to turn on you at some point. But had you maybe used your idol for him, had you played it for him, maybe he wouldn't have been like, I'm going to turn on John. But looking at that vote, I know your heart's racing. You have the idol. You don't know where the votes are going because we saw this vote was extra chaotic. Like everyone's names being tossed around. And you have two idols. So I'm just curious, was there any part of you wanting to play two, or you just knew that you were just going to play the one because you wanted to have the other one for later?
I knew I was only playing one idol. I wasn't 100% sure who I was playing it for. I had narrowed it down at that point. My conversations leading up to that tribal were not good. They were not good at all. It's like everyone kept saying, I think Greg said it in one of his conversations with Lauren, but then we're back to Alex and Jim. And Alex and Jim made no sense to vote for at that time. There was no logic behind it. I was on a call with Mackenzie, Lauren, and Austin, and we're kind of like going down. And I think Mackenzie mentions Alex is just getting incredibly aggravated and he's like pissing everyone off. And I'm just sitting there. It's like, okay, if that's the case, why are we voting Alex? We should be voting one of the other two. We should be voting either Lilly or Greg. And they shut me down immediately. And that's the point where I was very convinced an idol needs to be played today.
Yeah. And I'm sitting in the background and you can't see me, but I'm like, John, play your idol on Zucker. And I'm just trying to like send you these messages like, John and I are connected. I know we are. I know he's going to get these messages from me. Guess not.
No. Unfortunately, I didn't. And right before we went into a tribal, there was a mad scramble. Everyone was free. Like everyone played it cool. And then Zucker and I were on right before going into tribal council. And I was like, listen, I don't know what's happening tonight. And Zucker's freaking out at this one because he had received a message from Simmons saying things have changed, the plan's changed, but he didn't say what it was. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And so Zucker's freaking out, I'm freaking out, and we're just about to go into tribal. The last seconds is like, hey, I have an idol, because I didn't want to blindside him with this idol. I didn't want him to be like surprised when I pulled up this idol. I was like, hey, I have the idol from like the first night. It's being played for one of the two of us. It just depends how tribal council goes.
At any time, did you think like, so you didn't know that it was going to be one of you guys getting, like, you didn't know it was going to be Zucker getting votes until right beforehand?
I didn't know
at
all.
You assumed?
I had assumed based on conversations where the vote might have gone. But like I wasn't 100% sure. And then when Zucker said, like, at that point I was already pretty convinced I had to play the idol for myself. That day there were several content creators who also made videos about worst idol plays in Survivor history. So I'm paranoid beyond belief because like I don't know where this vote's going. And I have these like videos popping up in my YouTube feed being like, hey, here are the worst Survivor idol plays. I'm like, well, I don't want that to be me. And I wasn't sure where it was going. I'm like, they're going to try to blindside me. Like, they're trying to get me out with this idol. Because Lauren and Mackenzie continuously told me all day, you don't have to play your idol. I'm like, don't say that.
And that makes me play my idol. Playing an idol on someone else is also a gamble because then other people see how tight you are. But if you had, like, I just wonder, like, had you thought of saying to them, oh, I'm playing my idol, but I'm playing it on so-and-so.
At that
and point, then get the votes on you and then really use the idol on you. And it works.
Maybe. I don't think they would have believed me if I had said it. I also needed to have an idea of where the votes were going in the first place. And I honestly didn't feel like Zucker was getting the votes in any of my conversations leading up to that. I should have. I thought like maybe Austin was getting the votes, maybe someone else. But in the end, I knew I prioritized my own safety in the game. Because I knew like, even if I lose an ally here, as long as I'm still here, I still have potential to win. Granted, it was much less potential to win at that point. I would say my win equity dropped incredibly at that tribal council. I didn't lose one ally. I lost 4 allies. And arguably my 4 closest allies in the game on that one vote. And it was like, oh, I'm literally on an island by myself now. So I had to just keep fighting.
All right, so Zucker goes out and we see you get on a call with Mackenzie and you're like, you fucked me, Mackenzie.
She did.
Like you were enraged. And of course, I would have been too. And then you kind of lash out a little bit at Lauren as well. So were you just done with those two at that point? Including Lauren?
I was so livid after that vote. Because again, like I said, leading up to that vote all day, they're like, you don't have to play your idol. You don't have to play your idol. You don't have to play your idol. Yet they're still blindsiding me. Like they're still making an attack against me. And I was mad. I was real mad. Did I cross a line? Oh, I sure did. I will gladly admit that. And Austin sat there the entire time for both of those conversations, just trying to feign that he was in on it. And like in my blind rage, I was like, oh yeah, Austin voted Alex, we're good. And then like as I went on, I'm like, Austin was in on this thing the entire time. But no, I was really mad. But I mean, I apologized to both of them because I knew I crossed the line there, and like I let emotions take control of me, and it is a weakness I have. But at that point, I also knew like whatever, I have to get over it, which is why I made the apologies to them. And also because, I was in the wrong there, but I made apologies and hoped that like we could mend fences. And like Lauren and I were fine afterwards. Mackenzie was really cold to me afterwards, though. We had one conversation. I think it took us about a day before we were able to actually like get a call together, just because of like scheduling stuff. But even that call, it was like both of us were like, okay, that happened, and we never really got anywhere after that. And then she just stopped talking to me.
Well, she doesn't
at that
think
point,
you've apologized, by the way. So you might want to again. Or
no,
not.
I already did again. I did again the other day.
Okay.
Just to like refresh and like we're good. Like there's no animosity between the two of us at all. But yeah, she just didn't want to talk. She didn't talk to me at all. So at that point I was like, well, I don't care. Now.
Well, I'm glad.
Also, you betrayed me, so you're leaving this game. So I immediately sorry, Denny. I immediately went to Greg and I was like, hey, or maybe I went to Simmons first. I think I went to Simmons, then Greg. I was like, hey, I'm at a point now, like, I have literally like zero chance to win the game at this point. I don't care if I lose. All I care about is that Mackenzie and Lauren go before me. I made that very clear to them that night.
I'm glad that you brought up, and I know we have to move on, but the fact that you brought up that both Mackenzie and Lauren told you not to play your idol, and you still were feeling like, I better use it. I would have felt actually pretty good, because if I am going to blindside someone, I am not going to mention their idol at all. Like, I'm not going to bring it up at all. So the fact that they brought it up would have made me actually feel better, which maybe isn't good, but.
And again, I did have that thought process. I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need to play it. But then I'm like, or maybe they're saying don't play your idol so that I don't play my idol so that I go home. So like I was in that cycle for a bit. And like I said, 3 different content creators, bad idol play videos. I was already like, no, I'm not letting this happen to me on this day of all days. And in the end, I probably wouldn't have played it if I felt there was a better plan in place. Alex was not a better plan. Alex didn't make sense to be voted for there. It made sense to be voting for either Greg or Lilly there because they were the more dangerous players. And I'd already told them, hey, this vote is incredibly important. It's going to shape the rest of the season. And I said it in, I don't know, one of my rage-fueled conversations with either Mackenzie or Lauren, where it was like, we didn't have the numbers, like they wanted to vote you out. I definitely think it was the Mackenzie one. They wanted to put it on you. And it's like, that's okay. I had the idol. As long as we knew where the votes were going, we win the vote.
All right, Ian is having a couple technical issues, but in the meantime, we'll keep going with our questions.
All right, so John, going into that tribal where you play your second idol, we heard you say that you played it to kind of get it out of the way, get some trust with everyone. Is that really what you were trying to do, or did you feel like the votes were coming your way?
That's a great question, because I wasn't really sure what was happening with this vote. I knew I had laid it out at that point. I knew that everything was in Greg, Lilly, Mike, and Alex's hands. They had the power. And I very much knew that because leading up to the tribal council, Austin came to me and was like, what the hell's going on, John? What's the vote? Lauren came to me. What the hell, John? What's the vote? I get a message from Mackenzie, who hasn't talked to me for like 2 days at this point, being like, John, what's the vote? And like everyone's frantically coming to me being like, what's the vote? And I'm like, okay, I hope it's Mackenzie. But I'm not going to tell them that because I don't want them figuring that out. And the other people who I'm trying to work with now, which are my better options for going further in the game at this point, because they have the power to like not trust me. So I was fairly confident the vote was going on Mackenzie. But I also had an inkling at that point that Greg definitely knew I had the idol. And if Greg knew I had the idol, then Simmons, Alex, and Lilly also all knew I had the idol. Because right before the Zucker vote, one of the big things why I wanted to move against Greg and Lilly in that vote is because Zucker came to me at one point and was like, they're way closer than we thought they were. So like I had an idea that those 4 were already working closely together. And I was hoping that my proposal to take out Mackenzie here, which would be someone they might have trouble getting the votes for later on, would get me there. But I also wanted to add a guarantee that I was going to be there for the next vote. And I also wanted them to see that by giving up the idol here, I was unprotected. I was putting my trust in them moving forward. Is that a bad idol play? Some people might view it that way. I negated one single vote with 2 idols. But my philosophy when it comes to an idol is there's no such thing as a bad idol play because it's getting you a week further no matter what. It's guaranteed safety. Could it have been used better? Absolutely. But I don't think there is any idol play that is completely useless, except for Lauren's pre-merge.
Well, it's better to play an idol incorrectly and be safe than to not play it and go home. So, and I get it, your heart's racing and you're thinking like, I would hate to go out with an idol in my pocket. No one wants to do that.
I am. It's so
just
stressful.
Like, oh, you still could have had it. And then after that vote, we see like, well, first off, you win the memory challenge. I knew no one was going to beat you in that. But then there's like some friction there between you and Greg. It seems like we hear Austin say that you were wanting to work with Lauren and definitely not wanting to work with Greg. We hear Greg saying some things about wanting to get you out of the game. So were you thinking like just about his threat level? And why was that not appeasing to you, knowing that you have a huge target on your back as well? Like, why not come together?
So, I mean, I've already said it. My strategy moving throughout this in-game was to keep high-level threats in the game. I wanted to keep high-level threats in the game because in my first game, I kind of tried to play back a little bit. I was really bad at playing back a little bit. Denny can attest to that. But I tried to keep back a little bit to like mask how good I could, like the potential of how good I could be in the game. And it just didn't work. I ended up getting blindsided as soon as my alliance had a chance to turn on me. So approaching this game, I was like, I'm playing this the opposite way. I'm going to play this as a threat. I am just going to go out guns a-blazing the entire time. I'm not going to hold back who I am, because if I hold back who I am, I'm not playing to my fullest potential. So I had to go in balls to the wall the entire time. And I legitimately still think that is my best chance to win a game. So yeah, I wanted to keep these high threat level player games. I wanted to keep the Gregs and the Laurens and the Mackenzies and the Andrews in the game, because rather than having to bring my threat level down and not playing to my fullest potential, what I'm now doing is lowering my threat level by raising the threat level of the people around me. So that was the plan. And going into the merge, I really wanted to work with Greg because I knew he was going to be someone from our first conversation that I needed to be working with if I wanted this plan to go off. We voted out Andrew, and it was like, okay, this is a sacrifice I can make. Then Zucker got voted on. I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Like, threat level thing is like, well, I got to take Mackenzie out now. I got to serve that or return that serve back to her. And then at that point, it was like, okay, I can't do this hide behind threats thing. There aren't enough of these like very obvious threats, because I do think everyone in this point of the game, I think the win equity of this cast is incredible. I don't think there's a single person on this cast who had a 0 win equity when they were voted out. I think everyone who got voted out had a potential to win the game when they were voted out. And even here, I mean, there was a comment Lilly made in a confessional early on about me not viewing her as a threat. I always viewed Lilly as a threat, because to me, the more dangerous threats weren't the threats everyone was talking about. It was the threats no one was talking about. It was the social players and the strategic social players who are hiding behind the scenes and kind of pushing votes where they want them to go. So I knew Lilly was a threat. I knew Alex and Simmons were threats. I knew that Zucker was a threat. And I knew Jim was a threat in his own way, because at that point in the game, everyone was kind of viewing Jim as like the GOAT. And I honestly believe like Jim still is there. I'm sitting there thinking Jim still has a potential to win this game if it gets to the end. And I don't want him sitting beside because I think he beats me. So we're at this point where it's really hard to hide your threat level amongst higher threats because so many of them have gone. The visible threats have gone. We're now into those sneaky threats. So when Greg and I kind of have this animosity towards each other, we're both thinking at this point, I think, at least I know I'm thinking, and I'm assuming Greg's thinking very similar because Greg was also a very logical person. It's either him or me at this point. Whichever one of us comes out on top is the one who has the chance of getting to the end of this game.
Yeah, obviously, I think you guys would have had to come together and really form something earlier on. I was just curious. Moving ahead to you getting voted off. And you think you're done. And you're really not. So were you excited to have a chance to come back into the game?
I was so torn when Ian and Morgan announced this twist. I was like, I thought I was done with this. Like, an org is such a fun experience. It's an incredible experience. You meeting fantastic people throughout playing a game. You gotta have a lot of fun, but it's draining. It's a lot of time. You are pretty much spending like 22 hours of the day communicating with people and like finessing them and conversing with them. You're having so much small talk with people in order to like get deeper conversations and open up the possibility of working together and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a relief being voted out, especially because I've been fighting so hard for the last couple of votes being on the bottom. But then there's also the gamer in me who's like, yes, I'm not done yet. I can still do this. Then there's also the Survivor fan of me who hates it when people come back into the game after being voted out. So
yeah, that's why
it was this real, like, there were these massive like dichotomy within myself about like, how am I responding to this? But in the end, the gamer in me comes out above everything else. So I was quite happy to have another chance to get back in the game.
Now, had you stayed in the game and won, would you have felt that your win was deserved, or would you not, because you did actually get voted out of the game?
It's a tough question because I got voted out of the game and then came immediately back. So it's not like I was sitting in limbo for a long time.
Right.
Also, the immunity challenge I got voted out on was total bullshit.
You had no chance.
No chance. I was surprised I got as far into that as I did. I could have sworn my name would be the first one out. I was very glad when it wasn't, because I was like, okay, maybe I have a chance here. Before the Lauren vote, I had been working really hard with Simmons and Alex to see if we could get a Greg thing going. Greg made this confessional in that episode about how I thought the votes were going on. I never thought the votes were going on Greg. I hoped the votes were going on Greg. I hoped that like Mike and Alex could see the logic in there. And then as soon as Lilly plays that steal a vote, I was like, it's done. Like, that's everything. Like, we can't do anything now. Any possible chance that the vote's going on Greg just went out the window. So then going into this immunity challenge where somehow Jim and I guess the exact same number out of 1,000.
Crazy bizarre.
Yeah, especially because I chose that number because that number actually has significance in mine and Ian's relationship, whereas Jim just picked that number. So I don't know how that worked, but
I thought he had some reason.
I'm sure he did, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, it was bizarre. And I mean, gladly he did, because then I didn't end up being automatically out of that challenge. But then, so he picked someone and like they keep picking in, like, no one's picking me. I'm like, this is weird. There's no way they're just handing me immunity. And then of course I get that lucky last pick there. and I'm choosing between Simmons and Alex, the two people I'm trying to convince, hey guys, let's vote out Greg. And I hummed and hummed about that decision for longer than I should have. And I know talking to Simmons afterwards, like he was a little butthurt that I picked Alex, but Alex was the one who I thought needed more convincing, because I figured Simmons with Austin in the picture would come over and work with us. I was incorrect. It didn't matter. But yeah, and then coming back after that, it was a hard fought challenge. I was really mad after being voted out the first time that I didn't get to take out Lauren. My exit confessional that I said after that was, can't believe you guys took out Lauren without me. So I was really glad to have the opportunity to fight back against Lauren and ultimately being the reason she went home.
Yeah, and that was a fun, I mean, it was fun sitting back and watching you guys battle it out that way. I really didn't know who was going to win that. Lauren, after the fact, said, oh, I had no chance of winning that. I knew John had it in the bag. But I didn't think, like, I thought Lauren would do better than she did.
That's an excuse.
I, to the surprise of absolutely no, I'm a fat man and don't do stamina all that well. So the fact that I picked those cups up, and the hardest thing about that challenge was getting in position. Because taking 2 cups with ping pong balls on them and moving them out to your sides without dropping them, incredibly difficult. And I was just like, got in position. I was like, don't move. Whatever you do, don't move. And I just knew, knowing Lauren personally, knowing that she holds like her like record wall sits like half an hour or something like that, I'm like, I'm done. Like, there's no way I win this. And then Lauren falls, and I was like, oh my God, I actually beat Lauren. I was ecstatic.
And you were ecstatic, but the faces of everyone else on that Zoom call, not so much. I don't think they would have been ecstatic if it was Lauren either, but yeah, they didn't look too amused. Moving ahead to the challenge Extreme Flip Cup. I know you had been trying to like get people to work with you to take Greg out, but then Greg wins the challenge, essentially taking away your chance. Like, you had to have known in that moment, like, it's done for me. Because
I did. I was incredibly defeated. I held my funeral after that challenge and was just like, hey guys, like, I get it. The writing's on the wall. I suck. Austin betrayed me. I don't like Austin. But like, let's not spend hours and hours on Zoom calls. We don't need to. Let's just figure this out. And
now, did you think that the Dan Giesling funeral thing was going to work in your favor? Or were you just wanting to go out classy?
Both. I wanted to put it on a show. But I also thought it might actually work. I also thought that maybe if they felt comfortable that like I wasn't doing anything to move against them, they wouldn't be that, and they would allow them to be a little more malleable. It was not the case. I chose the wrong target. I tried to get the votes on Lilly. That's not what I should have done. I should have gone to Greg and been like, hey, let's vote out Austin. Because in retrospect, again, hindsight's 2020. Greg and I have talked about this since the game, and looking at everything, I was just way too loyal in this game. I didn't betray Austin ever in this game. We were allies since day one. We were working together really well. Even when he betrayed me, like, I knew I could still trust him, because I knew after the Zucker vote, it was very clear that Lauren and Austin realized they made a mistake and that they still wanted to work with me. They just did a very bad job of pulling me back in. But I pulled them back in. And what I should have cut ties with Austin at that point. I kept thinking, Austin's my number. He's my only guaranteed number moving forward. Like, how else can I do this? What I should have realized was that Greg was having a hell of a hard time getting Austin out of that game, and he would have absolutely have flipped on him at any given point if I had approached him with that option. And that's what I really should have done.
All right. Well, I know we have some questions for you from your fellow castmates. So, Morgan.
Yeah, so because of kind of schedules and timing this week, we weren't able to ask everybody in the Facebook group, but we did ask the cast in their group chat, and we have a few questions. The first question is from Alex. He says, if you had been able to keep Zucker, what would have been your game plan moving forward?
It's really tough because if I had kept Zucker, it means that I've played the idol for Zucker and he's still there. Hopefully that means he feels more compelled to work with me. But we already know that I was kind of on his mind as a target pretty quickly. But the problem is I had lost Mackenzie, Lauren, and Austin still with that vote because they had flipped on me. So if I had kept Zucker, I'm probably still trying to make a move against Greg because I did view him kind of as this linchpin of that other side. And it became very clear just from talking to Greg, he is such a charismatic man. He is a charming beyond belief. You talk to him, and Mackenzie said it. She was willing to just like give him everything at the first time she talked to him. And I mean, I'm sitting there being like, you're not going to get me with this. I understand what you're doing here. But I knew other people had been enthralled with that. And I especially knew that after that vote. So at that point, I just had to mobilize against Greg as much as possible. It probably still wouldn't have worked.
All right. Next two questions are from Greg. First one, since we never seem to fully connect strategically, I was always concerned to bring vote plans to you in the event you'd use it against me. Was I wrong to think that? And in what circumstance would you have considered working with me?
I'm trying to think here. I don't think I really leveraged what people were saying for votes and to manipulate and like sway people different ways, because to me, information is so important in this game. It's your second most powerful weapon, with the first, of course, being your vote. And I didn't really like leveraging, oh, this person's throwing your name out, unless I had to, because I was always looking for the advantage for myself. And if it got around that John's saying you're throwing my name out, it's just going to put me in a worse spot in the game. So I would have loved to have known what Greg was thinking. It is unfortunate that the two of us were kind of on these two separate sides in this game, because I think the two of us would have worked incredibly well together if we'd actually came to fruition. And it's just so hard, and I can't remember the second half of this question.
What circumstance would you have considered working with him?
I mean, after the Zucker vote, I was just looking to get myself further in the game at that point. Before the Zucker vote, something that just made sense, honestly, is just a logical situation. If I was incredibly loyal to my allies in this game, but if someone came up to me and was like, hey, John, here's a itemized list of the reasons you should vote out Austin, I'd be like, okay, let's do it.
All right. His second question is, at early merge, you pitched keeping the perceived big threats together. Who would you have gathered for this group, and why do you think it never worked out?
Honestly, this group was the group that I actually pitched to Greg. And it was myself, Austin, Lauren, Mackenzie, Mike Simmons, and Greg himself. That, I think, would have been, those were at that point, in my eyes, the most obvious threats, with Austin kind of being this like off to the side threat. But I had a feeling people were starting to look at him as a threat based on conversations I was having. If the seven of us had actually been able to stick together and actually vote together, I'm pretty like we could have easily have been the final seven in this game. I think it's very obvious by the fact that we were very savvy. We had advantages, we were receiving advantages, and we were understanding votes and manipulating votes. I think these 7 people were the best way to move forward. And I also hoped in that position that with Austin and Mackenzie and Lauren, that I could have the majority within that 7. And I also knew that with Simmons, him and I had been talking a lot since that first tribe swap. And with Austin, so the 3 of us kind of could have a group within there as well. So I was really hopeful with that working out, but it just never came to fruition.
All right, next question is from Zucker. John, do you think there was anything you could have done better to lower your perceived and actual threat level, or did you feel in the moment that there was nothing you could really have done and that embracing it was the only thing you could do?
I've already spoken to this, and that is the fact that I don't want to lower my threat level. I want to play this game without inhibitors. I don't want to be going in half-assed with it just to like make it so that I could get further in the game. Because in the end, I think what's more dangerous than someone who's a perceived threat throughout the entire game is someone who becomes a threat towards the end game. Because those are the people you start getting scared of. Whereas a perceived threat has this point. There's a tipping point in the game where, and I think we were at that point where, and I was pitching it a lot in the last 2 votes where I got voted out. And that is the fact that we're now at a point where you can use my vote, keep me around, because it's way easier to rally votes against me, this perceived large threat, than it is to rally votes against someone like, say, Austin or Alex or Lilly, who are kind of like in the background a bunch and are coming and emerging as larger threats based on their social game.
All right, our next question is from Austin. Is there anything you regret? Is there anyone you regret voting out earlier that maybe could have helped your game down the road, or would you have stuck to the same path you traveled on?
Well, if we look at my voting record, I only voted 2 people out of the game. I only voted Gaby out of the game, and that was a no-brainer. As soon as she left that challenge, it was, again, in the pre-merge, I was preaching tribal unity, and leaving through a challenge, easy thing to rally people against. And then Andrew is the other one. And I thought about it. Like, I did want to work with Andrew. Andrew and I connected really well. We're very similar people. We get along with each other incredibly well. But that also meant that I understood exactly how Andrew was thinking about the game and knew what he was trying to approach and how he would be working at things. So I knew how dangerous he was. And had he not been going around saying John and Lauren are working together, he would have survived that vote. Because he wouldn't have been the target. You heard it from people in that vote that they didn't want to vote him out then, but like it kind of just became this consensus decision. And had he stuck around, would it have been better for my game? I don't know. Because what I'm just looking at here is the fact that Zucker's still that next vote. And that's where my game just completely blows up. And like I have such a narrow pathway to win at that point. I don't know if Andrew staying over, say, the other choices of Alex and Jim changes anything.
All right. Lauren asks, if you didn't use the idol when Mackenzie was voted out, would you have played it on me the next round to send Greg home?
Well, because I would be playing it after Lilly played the steal vote, absolutely. That's a no-brainer. At that point, it would become very obvious that, like, okay, Lauren's going home. She's the one who needs this idol right now, and I'm getting out my intended target anyways. Definitely, 100%.
Yeah, it would have been interesting how that would have played out, because everybody else would have known that you still had your idol.
That's the other thing, right? Because if that's the case, do they put the votes on Lauren? Do they put the votes on Austin? There's 5 of them. Like, they couldn't split it. So, like, oh, but they had 6 votes, right? But they can't put the 3 and 3 because we go to rocks. It's a tricky situation.
Yeah. There's so many like just rabbit
it's a nice thought experiment for you all.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question from Victoria. I'm trying to figure out if I made the right decision at the tribe swap. What would have happened at the episode 4 tribal if you were there instead of Jim? Or is this an irrelevant question because we would have won trivia?
I really appreciate Victoria giving me such props, but I was the one who got the question wrong on the Alexa tribe. So we probably still would have lost trivia, but I can guarantee, first off, I don't know if Lauren then goes to Exile again, because I was the one mainly pushing for her. So it could very likely be just 2 of Mackenzie, Austin, and I there. But I can guarantee you this one thing, there would have been no rock draw were I at that tribal council. And I did want to work with Victoria. I had connected with her before, like we knew of each other and like interacted before. So I was actually really eager when I saw her on the cast. I was like, oh, I'd actually like to take this time to get to know Victoria. But the stars didn't align. We didn't get an opportunity to play with each other. But yeah, at that rock draw, there is no way we were going to Rocks. And if for some reason I decided to go to Rocks, I'd tell you, Greg would not be the person I would be protecting.
All right, our last question is from Connor. What did you think your odds were of surviving that instant tribal? / did you think you were safe, or did you know that you were gone?
Oh, absolutely 0%. I already talked about it. That challenge was like designed for a way for me not to get immunity. And I was like, okay, all these votes are coming on me. It's very clear. It's written there. Like, it's so clear as day. And then, of course, I see the switch in McKenna's name for that idol. And I'm like, oh, yes, I can do this. I can do this. And I'm like trying to break this code. It's a very simple code when you get down to it. But I was so frenzied in the moment. I was flipping around the numbers in the code. So the way the code was written was like the first of the second or whatever. And you had to take the X letter of the X person voted out of the game to create a sentence. And I kept flipping around the numbers and I was like frantically trying to figure it out. Ian must have gotten at least like 20 guesses from me trying to figure out what was going on. And I was so frustrated when I finally like sat down with Lauren on Exile and figured out that clue, because it was so easy.
I will admit to, again, Morgan and I spent so much time creating this game that I really don't think there were many mistakes on the side of game creation and whatnot. But I think we made a mistake in the order of those 2 challenges. I think the pick whoever, whatever, doesn't get immunity should have been first, because there was an even number of people. And that would have, it wasn't glam versus everybody. But again, we planned this game so far in advance and we told ourselves we were never going to change anything because it didn't fit like a good narrative for the season. And this was just one of those things where it didn't work out for the minority's favor, and it's kind of boring and it sucks for John, but that's game creation. So
the fact that I came in though kind of negates the fact that it even happened.
Yeah.
It just kind of gave me an opportunity to show Alex that I was willing to work with him.
I love that you guys kept the integrity of the game and didn't make any switches throughout. Like, you had an outline and you stuck to it. So for that, John, 1 word to describe your game.
Loyal.
How'd that work out for you?
Not so great. You think I would have figured that out after the first time, but it's what I'm going to do. And like, the problem was, I mean, if I'm using a second word, it's logical, because that's the way I approached everything in the game, just from a logical standpoint of this makes the most sense for me, but it also makes the most sense for XYZ. So if it's making sense for other people, they should be able to see it and agree with me when I present that idea with them. And that's what really put me over the top in the Zucker move, because it made no sense. Because as we've talked about, like, everyone who wasn't named Greg, Alex, Lilly, or Mike Simmons was dead in the water at that point, because their games were completely tanked, whether it be breaking up the relationships that had been formed over the 20 odd days before that, whether it was just sowing enough doubt that people weren't sure if they could work with you, whether it was simply me working with Glam for that next vote. We're now at a point where so many games were so put out. And I saw that right away. I was like, this doesn't make any logical sense, because I already knew, based on what Zucker was telling me, that Glam was a thing. So I'm looking at it like, why did Lauren and Mackenzie do this? Why did they think it was a good idea to go with Greg? And that's what frustrated me the most about that situation. And every single vote after that, I posed the logical situation. Like I said, I'm a big threat. It's not hard to rally votes against me at this point in the game. Use me to take out these other people you are going to have a hard time getting the votes for.
So do you think your biggest flaw is that you anticipate others to view the game as logically as you?
Absolutely. It's been a running joke amongst myself and some other SGSN production members that there is no logic in orgs.
Yeah, because when we talked with Mackenzie, she basically said that she voted out Zucker because she was frustrated with you about the previous vote. So that was obviously an emotional move on her part that ended up, she self-admittedly said that it derailed her own game as well. So it was not a logical move for her either, and she knows that.
No, I think I benefit from more logical people in the game and less emotional people. But me voting out Mackenzie was a completely emotional move as well. So it's not like I played 100% logically the entire time. But there are certain cast members who should have realized how much I love a good revenge story.
Which real life survivor do you think you're most like?
I mean, I want to say it's one of these like big hitters, like a Rob Sesternino or something like that, but it's not. I'm just a Jonathan Penner. I'm just a loyal player who sees the logic in the game, knows how to proceed, and just like works on his social bonds with people to hopefully propel himself further in the game. And I get to about that Penner spot every single time.
I think that's a really good comparison.
Yeah, and hey, he's one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. You said the loyalty thing didn't work for you 2 times now. Will you ever play again?
Oh, it's going to take a lot to coax me out of retirement this time. This game, as fun as it is, as much fun as it is in the moment, it's tiring, it's exhausting, and it's really going to depend on like workload and stuff like that. But that being said, you guys convinced me to do it this time. So there's never a no, I'm not going to play again.
Well, it was so fun watching you. I'm proud of you for making the merge and just being yourself in the game. And you did good. Like, huge threat right out of the gate, and you made it really far. So kudos to you. I do hope I'll see you play in some capacity, at some point again. But thanks for sitting with us, John. You know, I could talk with you about this shit for hours. Maybe we'll do that sometime. But thanks for sitting with us tonight for the exit.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm just looking forward to being back on the production side from now on.
Well, yes, as Denny said, thank you to John for hopping on and chatting about his game. As someone who was sort of aligned with John in our first game during the pregame and then never got to play with him, it was nice to see your game, even though it was a completely different one. I think you learned a lot from your first game, and I think that's for people who play orgs all the time, like, learn something. Take something from each game and add it, because if not, you're just wasting your fucking time. as always, SGSN puts out episodes every Monday and Thursday for Exile Island. We are at the final 6 now. So we have just a few weeks left. We have just a few exit interviews left, which you can catch on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And Sundays, you can catch Alex, McKenna, and Jeremy doing our weekly recaps. Thank you for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time.